As I read the Warren volumes, I continued to find discrepancies again and again and again and again and again. I don't care whether it's Palmer McBride saying he was with Oswald in 1958 in New Orleans when Oswald was in Japan in the military, whether it's Alan Feld who said he was with Oswald in Memphis, Tennessee when Oswald was supposed to be on a ship to Japan. You know, it goes on and on and on and on and on. The obvious things that are known, and I didn't spend much time at it. Oswald at a shooting range when Oswald's supposed to be with his wife in Irving, Texas. Oswald buying a car when he's supposed to be at another location. So this is preceding the assassination. My point is that there are so many of these discrepancies that you become intrigued, and then your mind, at least my mind, turned to the point where I was looking for discrepancies. And there are lots of them. One thing leads to another. Oswald, to me, I don't speak Russian. I don't know anybody who does speak Russian. And Oswald's whole time in Russia is kind of, because of the language problem, is kind of a mystery, as it were. In the 1990s, late 1990s, or mid-1990s, I can't remember, I read an article that was translated from Spanish about a woman who lived in Argentina, Anita Zeiger. I recognized the name. Her father was Oswald's boss at the factory where he worked in Minsk. Talked to her on the phone through an interpreter, made arrangements to go out and see her. Didn't have any idea of the questions to ask her or what I was looking for. It's just that I had an opportunity to meet someone who knew this man for a year and a half, or during the time he was in Russia. They took him to the train station when he left. I got on the plane with my friend interpreter, and we flew to Argentina. And it was nice. She invited us to her house, gave us some little drinks called mate. She had some photographs which she showed us that she had taken in Russia of various people, Oswald included. Just basically talked about Oswald and Marina. And nothing was substantive, nothing was revealing, nothing was, oh my gosh. The second day, just as an off-the-cuff, offhanded remark, she was talking about her language abilities, and I said, well, how was Oswald's Russian? And she turned to me, and with just the only word I can come up with is startled. A startled expression. She looked at me, kind of raised her eyebrows and said, what? No, he didn't speak any Russian. And I was caught off guard because in my mind, the only thing I'd ever heard year after year after year was the words of Marina. He spoke Russian with a Baltic accent. Perfect Russian. And of course, Marina's remarks are substantiated by the people that they knew in Dallas in the White Russian community, one by one in the Warren volumes, describing Oswald's ability to speak Russian as perfect. George de Mohrenschildt said he preferred to reading classical Russian literature as opposed to reading English. You don't learn that by teaching yourself Russian at age 19 in the military. It just doesn't make any sense. So my point is, and I don't mean to take a long time or make this bigger than it is, but my point is, as the weeks and months go by, and as I read FBI reports or the Warren volumes or interview witnesses, one after another things just don't make sense. And there are very few situations that I investigated where it came to a dead end. Probably the dead end, if you will, was when I called John Pick in Lynn Haven, Florida, and I asked him about his remark to the Warren Commission about the fact that this photograph was not his brother. And as I've stated before, Pick said, I gave my testimony to the Warren Commission in 1964. I'll stand by that and have nothing further to say. So there's nothing I could do but say thank you and hang up the phone. In so many words, he confirmed that his testimony to the Warren Commission was accurate. He didn't say, John, that was not my brother. He simply said, I gave my testimony to the Warren Commission. I'll stand by that and have nothing further to say. You know, when you read things in the Warren volumes that don't make sense, then that's where I look and I try and find an answer. You wonder about these things. For example, Life magazine. You open Life magazine, there's Oswald. He does not look like the Oswald that that was accused of shooting the president. Big husky kid in a classroom. Well, looks like he's got a missing tooth. Then I remember from reading the Warren volumes that Ed Vogel said he took the photograph. And he sold it to Life magazine for $75. And he said he thought he helped patch Lee up after a fight, and he thought he broke a tooth or lost a tooth from that fight. There's another lead. What do? No dental records. All you got's Vobel. So I go to Marina. And I asked Marina if she could loan me the x-rays from the autopsy. And she did. And she even gave me photographs of Oswald's, part of Oswald's skull with the teeth. They're dirty and gritty and green, but they're clear, very clear. He had natural teeth. The fellow in the photograph appears to have a missing tooth. I have not, to this day, seen an end to the discrepancies. I looked at a few of these documents, and one of the things I found was a medical report of Oswald in California at Max 9. What was interesting is the date on that medical record was at a time, I believe it was a day or even 2 days before the Marine Corps records show that Oswald in Japan boarded a ship in Yokosuka for the 3-week voyage to San Francisco. So it's a small thing, but it's another document that shows Harvey was at Max 9 while Lee Oswald was still in Yokosuka, Japan. And these things continue and continue and continue and continue. We've all heard about Roger Craig saying Oswald got into a Rambler. Nope. The Warren Commission says he got into a bus. When you follow those leads out, it takes you someplace. We've all heard that a person who was wearing a white shirt was taken out of the back of the Texas Theater shortly after, or at the time, Harvey Oswald was taken out the front of the Texas Theater by the Dallas police and put into a squad car. We've all heard about that. We've all heard about Oswald, a man identified as Oswald, driving a red Ford Falcon 20, 30 minutes after the assassination when Harvey was in jail. We've all heard about these things. All I have done is simply try to lay the documents side by side. He's here. No, he's here. If you've got Harvey in jail, you put him in one column. You've got somebody driving this red Ford Falcon, call him Lee if you will, put him in another column. And then go backwards and start separating these people to the best of your ability. The guy in the classroom photograph with the broken tooth, the thin guy standing in front of the Bronx Zoo, John Pick says was not his brother, put him in the Harvey column. The people that were introduced to Harvey Oswald introduced himself to William Timmer in North Dakota in 1953. Timmer says he wanted to be called Harv. First indication I heard of the name Harvey. That's why I used Harvey for one of them. He, Lee Harvey Oswald, told William Timmer in 1953 he wanted to be called Harv. 6 months later, he's in Myra Drew's home class, and Myra Drew says, "How do you want to be called?" He says, "Harvey, call me Harvey." So Myra Drew always calls him Harvey. So you go through these things. Beauregard school records, 2 people. Myra says he was in her homeroom class. Harvey, no question. But the report cards show that you also had an Oswald in homeroom class 303 on the 3rd floor of Beauregard. So you put all these things side by side, and you have 2 different people using the name Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, in Beauregard, it might seem just absolutely astounding that you would have 2 people in the 8th grade use the name Lee Harvey Oswald in the same school. Well, we all have probably known someone, if our school is any size at all, and Beauregard was a decent-sized school, that had the same last name. Smith, Jones, Williams, whatever. And they had different first names. Nobody thinks twice about that, do they? If you had a John Williams in one class and in another class there's a Paul Williams, would you think that they're brothers related or anything? So if you've got Harvey Oswald in Myra Drew's class, he's a short, little, thin guy, and you've got Lee Oswald on the 3rd floor homeroom class, he's a big husky guy who gets in fights. Why associate those people? What would be the reason to associate those people? Now you see, what interested me one step further, let's go one step further. I have an interview that Ed Vobel gave to the local television station in New Orleans, and this was very shortly after the assassination. And I listened to it very closely. Vobel's talking about Lee Oswald, Lee Oswald, Lee Oswald, Lee Oswald, Lee Oswald. Lee wouldn't take anything from anybody. Lee would not back down from a fight, and so on. Now that's not Harvey, who Myra Drew says didn't have an ounce of fight in him. But Myra Drew said very clearly that it was Harvey Oswald in her classroom, and his best friend was Ed Vobel. Ed Vobel comes running out of the basement Mr. Roos, a piano fell on Harvey's legs. So Dorothy Duvik and I, we go into the basement, and there, in the middle of the room, is Harvey with a piano on his legs. So we lifted up the piano, and that was that. So now we've got Myra DeRoos knowing Harvey. And Harvey and Vobel rode their bicycles together every day, according to Myra DeRoos. Now we've got Vobel knowing Harvey Oswald. And a week after the assassination, we've got an interview with a local TV station, and Ed Vobel talking about his friendship with Lee Oswald, who he attended CAP meetings with in the summer of 1955, a year and a few months after he knew Harvey. He talked about Lee getting in a fight with Johnny Newmeyer. I talked to John Newmeyer. He was in Las Vegas. He remembered the fight clearly. Doesn't know if he broke Oswald's tooth, but said they fought for hours, a couple hours. And his brother got involved too, Johnny Newmeyer's younger brother. Anyway, what you've got is Ed Vobel clearly, according to Myra DeRoos, knowing Harvey. And then you've got Vobel, by his own admission, knowing Lee. You've got a very, very dangerous situation with Ed Vobel. Ed Vobel died in 1972, I believe. His father told the House Select Committee, when this House Select Committee tried to find Vobel, that he thought his son died under strange circumstances. He asked him to please investigate because he thought his son's death had something to do with the assassination of President Kennedy and his friendship with Oswald. So my take on that is, obviously, Vobel was silenced, and he happened to die. And this is something else. If you look at Vobel's death certificate, so I talked to his sister. His sister, her name is Sweetie Pie. Vobel had two sisters, and they still operate the Quality Florists shop in New Orleans, the same shop that they operated when Vobel was alive. His family operated. They still have the same flower shop. And she told me the story. He called one day from the Ochsner Clinic and said that he was not feeling good. He was in the hospital. They were going to admit him to the hospital, and they needed to do tests. But he was feeling fine. He'd be home the next day. Vobel died at the Ochsner Hospital, and that was it. He didn't die at this other memorial hospital as the death certificate states. But you see, what we're dealing with is a document. And people 50 years from now would simply look at the document and say, oh, he died at this hospital. Whereas the real truth can be had from the sisters of Ed Vobel. He didn't die at this hospital. He died at the Ochsner Clinic. And people familiar with the Kennedy assassination know about Alton Ochsner. So my point is, and I know I'm belaboring the point, but my point is, almost every avenue that I investigate has a further lead, a further something that leads you like a tree branch, to a big tree branch, to two smaller ones and smaller ones. It just keeps going, and it almost never ends. Well, it's my hope that I can provide a foundation. My research, my documentation will provide in the future a foundation for someone to gather up my materials and further this work. I don't consider it my work, I just consider it documents. So if a person has a particular interest in a particular area related to Harvey or Lee, get these documents from the Baylor website. See if you can expand on it and do your own research. Now, there is an end to this research. I mean, I'm sure in the National Archives, if I spent the next 3 or 4 years at the National Archives 1 month out of the year like I did for many years, I'm sure, without a doubt, I could come up with more items of interest, whether it be FBI manipulation of witnesses, Warren Commission changing testimony, direct testimony of their witnesses, whether it's indications of two Oswalds, whatever. But let me just say this. All of the research into Harvey and Lee, everything I've accomplished, could end with one DNA test. And of course, that's between any member of Robert Oswald's family and any member of Marina's family. If those DNA tests were to show that those people are not related, then you have Harvey and you have Lee, who are not brothers.